Everyone heard the slap before they understood what caused it, but no one expected the woman who rose from the ground to look calm, almost dangerously calm. It happened on a bright, cloudless afternoon at Fort Ashbury's outdoor training grounds. Soldiers were lined up for inspection when General Briggs, legendary Navy SEAL, feared by every recruit, leaned in close to the new arrival. A young woman with steady eyes and a quiet posture. No one knew her name yet. No one dared to ask, but they all heard his voice when he growled, "Fuck you, and struck her across the face. And in that instant, the base went silent. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Briggs had always ruled through fear, but today something felt different. The air was too still, the sunlight too bright, casting sharp shadows across the sand. Even the dust seemed to pause. The female soldier didn't flinch. She simply placed a hand against the red mark on her cheek and looked up at him with eyes that didn't belong to a rookie. They belonged to someone who had seen monsters bleed. The murmurs rolled through the formation. Some stepped back. Others leaned forward. One sergeant whispered, "That wasn't wise. Not with her." But the general didn't hear it. Or maybe he didn't care. She thought she'd never see him again. She was wrong. Her name was Aria Cole. Officially, she'd been transferred from an intelligence unit. Unofficially, the truth sat buried under 8 layers of clearance. She had spent years in places where sunlight never touched. Years doing the kind of missions whispered only in windowless rooms. Missions that carried names like Night Harvest and Black Drift. She didn't brag about them. She didn't speak of them. She carried them, quietly, painfully, permanently. Now she stood in front of a man who had no idea who he'd just hit. Briggs stepped closer, his boots crunching the gravel. "You think you're special," he snarled. "You think you can walk in here with that blank stare?" Aria didn't answer. Her heartbeat was steady, too steady. She remembered every lesson drilled into her bones. Never strike first, never reveal the file, never show the ghost behind the uniform. But the soldiers around them saw something shift. The light in her eyes growing colder. The air tightening as though the base itself was holding its breath. A soft breeze brushed against Aria's wrist. A reminder, a warning, a trigger. She wasn't supposed to react. But then Briggs made his mistake. He grabbed her by the collar and shoved her backward. Hard. Her boots skidded across the ground. The crowd gasped, even the birds scattered from the fences. That shove awakened something she had buried so deep. She prayed it would never surface again. She straightened, slowly, deliberately. The heat of the afternoon shimmered around her, outlining her like a blade drawn into daylight. "General Briggs," she said softly, "I'm standing here because someone believes this unit needs protection." Protection. The word rippled across the field like distant thunder. Briggs scoffed. "Protection? From who?" "From you." The crowd froze. Aria finally reached into her pocket, not for a weapon, not for retaliation, but for a small black badge. A badge most soldiers would never see in their lifetime. The kind that erased ranks. The kind that ended careers. The kind that smelled faintly of truth and danger. Briggs stopped breathing. He recognized it instantly. Black Ops Oversight Division. Her real assignment was simple. Observe him. And if necessary, remove him. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "Your misconduct reports aren't rumors. They're verified. And today you crossed the final line." Briggs stumbled back, not from her strength, but from the sudden collapse of his own power. The soldiers around him shifted, no longer afraid of him, but stunned by her. And then the tension broke. Military police poured into the yard like a wave of discipline and authority. Boots thundered. Radios crackled. A commanding officer shouted Briggs's name with a tone that carried the weight of justice. The general tried to speak, but his words dissolved into the dry wind as the cuffs locked around his wrists. Aria didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply breathed, finally, fully, as the weight of years loosened from her shoulders. The soldiers watched her with a new kind of respect, not for her badge, but for her restraint, her courage, and her terrifying calm. Justice didn't shout today. It whispered and everyone heard it. Because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits, and it finds its way back. And sometimes it arrives wearing the quietest uniform on the field. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales like this one.